welcome on this more or less strange Friday, the Friday before Easter. I hope everybody is fine. I hope everybody is healthy. But by saying that, we all know that our industry is, it's a tough job at this moment. This presentation is about scenarios that we think here at the office, and I will explain later to you where we're from, that we think could be more or less a scenario for the future. So the title is Coronavirus and Events, and based on the frequently asked questions that we had in the last couple of weeks, we will try to have a glimpse into the future. Again, if you have questions, please drop them in the chat function, and I will stop the presentation in a couple of minutes after I had some slides, and then try to answer your questions. You can also use the Q&A. To start off with, I'm from the Netherlands. I will tell you later on who I am, but let's start with the feeling I hope everybody has. In the Netherlands, we have that one day per year where the cows come out of their winter habitat, and then they go out into the fields, and then we see things like this. Probably this is how we all feel at this moment. I will show you. We created an event out of it. Of course we did. This is a diary brand that uses that first day of the cows coming out as a brand event. It's Campina in the Netherlands, and for sure everybody has this feeling, being locked down, being isolated, and being event professionals. So that's the end of the cows, I'm sorry. But this feeling, I think we share this one. We want to go out, we want to meet people, and there's already first positive point. I think being isolated, being in lockdown, this shows that one of the strongest DNA-based things we all have is that we just want to meet up with people. And there you have the proof of the fundamental impact of our industry. Without meeting people, it's a tough couple of weeks. So we'll get back on that one later for the glimpse into the future. My name is Sjoerd Weikamp. I know that's very difficult in English. You can call me Stuart, but in the chat you just ask your question. No problem for that. Underneath you see all the things we do at the office. Eventbranche.nl is the media platform in the Netherlands for event marketing and live communication. We also have a second label, Evenement Organiseren, where we just share a lot of tips, knowledge, visions for people that have questions in terms of how to organize an event. The Gouden Giraffe is the event awards. You see it at the back. It was planned last Monday, so we canceled that one. And underneath you see different things we do with our company, but that's not that important for today. More important for today is that I'm just like you, just a normal human being that is sitting at home, is doing the home teaching for his children. Dad of two, Mirte and Aafke, and that's probably the biggest event my whole life already. But for now, you see that time is differently addressed in my agenda. So priority number 1 and 2 are in the screen for you over there. And the rest is just for fun to show you where I'm from. Okay, so back to the presentation. Once again, we will do it in English. Whenever you have a question, you can use 2 tools. There is the Q&A tool, but for me, more easy, and I like that if people ask questions in the open, please use the chat function. One more time, it's in the menu. Most of the menus have it in the more function, and then on top is the chat function. When you open it, you will now see that people showed us where they're from and that they're okay, and that the audio is okay as well. So let's get things started, and I will try to answer questions whenever they pop up. So we, as a media platform, we have a, oh, Danielle is raising her hand. Danielle, please ask your questions in the chat. That's more easy for me because of the number of people. So whenever you have a question, do it in the chat function. I will get back to you at certain times in the presentation. Thank you. So as a media platform in the Netherlands, we had an awful lot of questions. So frequently could be an awful lot of asked questions in these last couple of weeks. And I will take you just briefly through the main questions. But what I would like to show you was something that already popped up in the Netherlands after a couple of days being in lockdown. And I love the event. It translated into English. It's about being touched online. So what you see is a venue in the Netherlands. I'm sorry, two audio is too difficult for me. I will show you a brief of the event later on. This is an event organized in Utrecht in one of our industrial event venues. The crowd, the guests, were 50 VIP iPads, witnessing just some entertainment. Some poets were over there. And the atmosphere was very special, with people applauding from the home, but the audio, of course, filled the venue. So I just will show you a very short piece out of it. And even the artists were surprised by how catchy it was. So I just show you when they came on. Yeah, here's the audio of the applause.
Wow, dit is echt zo leuk.
And the artists are saying, wow, this is so special. So this is how we have to be flexible and creative, what is more or less the fundamental base of our industry. So I'm not worried about that one. We will think of things. But for now, for today, let's have a look at the frequently asked questions that we had in the last couple of weeks. This was the question, of course, that everybody started asking, and there's no answer to that one. There is an answer in terms of how do we think that we will get back on track. And also probably an answer if it will be the same track that we're coming from. Later on in the presentation, I will give you a more detailed answer to that question. But for now, I see it's a three-phased scenario. So for now, we're in lockdown. If you want it or not, we are in lockdown. And probably in the Netherlands, we have the 28th of April as more or less a breaking point for smaller events. For the bigger events, it's on the 1st of June. But if you look around and see other countries that were hit first, probably we will have to survive the summer. And then even after that, we don't know if it will be open. But this is the first phase. The first phase will be lockdown. And in the lockdown phase, you have to go online. Our industry is based on meeting people, and there is an alternative. So we have to create experiences. We have to create meetings. We have to create things like this. And I'm very happy having 30 people in on such a beautiful Friday. So things can still work. Of course, we all support and strongly believe in live, but there's an alternative for that one. In the second phase, we will have a phase of slowly getting back to normal, whatever normal will be. But then again, the online part of our strategies or of event strategies will be by far more bigger than it was. The live events then in phase 2 will have to be so special and so well thought of. Taking care of hygiene, 1.5 meter distance, things like that. I will get back to that later. And then in phase 3, it's up to us. Will we go back to business as it was, or will we change things by saying, okay, this virus is more than just a virus. It's also a wake-up call for the new world that we created. I'll get back to you later in the presentations to a more detailed answer to this one. Then there's that question, will September be booming? And for the love of the industry, of course it will. But looking at the facts, looking at research, looking at our own crisis monitor, for instance, eventbrunch.nl did a crisis monitor for event professionals as well as for the clients. And clients are already saying at the end of March, beginning of April, that they were cut down in budgets for the second part of 2020. So in my opinion, if you just look at the figures, and I so hope that I'm wrong, but if you look at the figures, probably we will have a very slow start. So our companies, our industry has to take care of that slow start period. And in that slow start period, I do not think September will be booming. I think we will be very careful. We have to think of creative concepts, a way to also use the 1.5 meter probably. So we have to think of different things than we were doing prior to the Corona crisis. So in short, will September be booming? No, I don't think so. But is there then any positive side on this one? Yes, there is. I think there is, and it's more or less in bigger terms. But if you see, just for an example, the Netherlands, how event associations work together, how different media companies try to address the problems in the industry, how the government is now finally seeing, oh, there is that industry. We know the festival industry, but there's also that industry of billions of euros that is now completely locked down. So there's another positive thing. I get back on that one in one of the slides, but I think our profession in the last couple of years made a huge professionality a jump into marketing and communication world. So we are not anymore the team or the tool that is cut away as first, but we have to be realistic, and that is why we have to look at what will the long-term impact be of this coronavirus on the future of our industry. And that was one of the most asked questions as well. And that's what my presentation is about. So again, if you have any questions, I will try to answer them once in a while. Just use the chat function, that's more easy. And if you then send the question to all panelists, and it's when you type your message, it is on all panelists, we can all see it. And if you do not want to see other people to join, you can send it to me personally. Okay, so here we go. Let's have a glimpse into the future. And the glimpse into the future, I used two of the biggest events in my career being an event media professional. And the first one was when I just stepped into the industry, 9/11 popped up. And the question you can ask yourself is, the scenario that we saw coming out of 9/11 with a huge impact on our industry, is that the example for the impact of COVID-19 and the impact it will have on events and on live communication? The answer is yes, but there's a but. Yes, but. And I'll show you the but later on, but the yes I will show you directly if the presentation works. I'm sorry, guys. Yeah, here we go. So looking back at 9/11, just skipping the bigger things that went on in the world, in the whole of the world after 9/11, for our industry, security became one of the main topics on the checklist of every event professional, especially for the companies and the brands. They even looked for venues that were on top when it was based on security, and also security companies that were used to have the festivals and the public events to be secured very well. They now had the business events, even smaller ones, even with not that specific security question, but almost everywhere you look, there were security guards, more or less, combined with their hospitality. Of course, that's what we do in the business industry events. But security became one of the basic ingredients of events, and it still is. And I think if you then look at what is going on now, there are two things coming out that it will really have an impact on how we will organize events. For the second phase, I explained in the beginning, the second phase where we will open up and where we can organize events, for sure for months, first I said weeks, but I think it will be months. Social distancing will really be a topic. And I don't know when that will end, but it will be there. So this is a picture of a company in China where people do their lunch like this. I don't think we will cater like this on events, but it's something that will really have an influence on events, on your events for the first couple of months, and probably even longer than that. So this is here it is, your first future impact. But it's not that big a problem, because I will skip the intro of this video, but this is a video of 2015, and you can imagine 1.5 meters between these things. And again, I will pause it so I can explain it. This is the introduction of a car without the car being there, without a venue. At the end, it was a venue, of course, but it was just an old fabric that was used with chairs more or less 1.5 meters beside each other. And they experienced something very strongly, something very beautiful by combining live and VR. So we don't have to be scared for that 1.5 meters. It will affect, of course, bigger rooms, bigger conventions, congresses. But let's be creative and let's find something. And again, this is 2015, and if you see the impact, I will skip a little bit of the movie. Touching hands when the...
No more decorations. Thinking 100 devices and controlling 300.
So this is your example, and then for it's 5 years ago. So we can, of course we can, and we will find solutions. But then the second impacts, just being based on practical things, that will be hygiene, and hygiene will be just as normal as security. So there will be places at events, mobile. I think that you can use the washing cream or whatever we will think of. Maybe even branded things before in front of your mouth. I don't know. I don't know how far it will go. I don't know what restrictions will be. I don't know what will be in event permits maybe. But hygiene will have a big impact as well. So then to the second scenario, by looking at the chat, there's no question at this moment. So please fill in your questions whenever you have one, and I will try to, after each scenario, I will try to answer them. But the second scenario, also based on a big event in the last couple of years that had a huge impact on our industry, is the crisis of 2008. And the crisis of 2008 was more or less the crisis of the banks, the financial crisis, the economic crisis that it became. And there's a couple of lessons that we have to learn coming out of that crisis. That also more or less is the scenario, just like the scenario of 9/11 based on social distancing and hygiene. This is also a scenario that we can look into the future and say, okay, this will probably go like this and this. So yeah, here we are. Looking back at 2008, one of the biggest problems our industry had to deal with was that in bigger companies, bigger brands that weren't that far in the experience company economy already, they just dropped out, sacked as almost the first people, the event managers. So team of event marketeers at banks or at bigger brands, they were cut down with 80% going out. So that was a big and important way to get out of this crisis for the bigger companies, to sack people. And one of the first people that went out were the people at our industry, in our industry. And if you then look at what's going on now, you can ask yourself the question, will this also be the first group of people that will be sacked? And what about the budgets? So I'm not an economic professor or anything like that, but of course you now see that how longer it takes, how big the impact will be. And yes, there will be a recession. And I cannot speak in terms of budgets based on percentage or things like that. But there are a couple of researchers already done. For instance, our own crisis monitor, where people already in the last week of March, in the first week of April, people from the bigger brands and companies already said to us that they that budgets for the second part of 2020 were already cut down. Not that they completely disappeared, but just to be sure, they were cut down. If things get back to normal, of course they will get back to normal as well. How long that will take, that's up to the economic people. But there's a more or less little positive side on this one, because I think comparing to 2008 and where we are now as an industry, we are by far more professional. We are by far more recognized as being one of the strongest, and in my opinion, the strongest tool for for marketing and communication. So we're up there with the rest of the important things within the marketing and communication mix. And that's, in my opinion, a big difference for 12 years ago, where just the small top of the pyramid of our industry was talking about things like impact, ROI, and effect. So I think there's a big difference. We have something to tell. I see the first question coming in, and just to show you that I see you, I will read it to you. I heard that 48,000 people will lose their job in the event industry. Is that correct? Yes, based on I'm sorry, go back to that one. Based on the figures that came out of a research just here in the Netherlands, our industry was is about like 7 billion euros, and they said we will lose 50%. We will lose 50% of that revenue in the industry. But the industry in this research is festivals, public events, business events, congresses, exhibitions, so it's all together. And that being more or less an example for the rest of Europe, they said, okay, we now have 10,000 jobs within this industry, and by the restriction and measurements that are now taken, we predict that at the end of these restrictions, we will lose half of these people, half of these jobs. So there's a small different definition of, is it a job or is it a person that you like lose in your company? But most important is, yes, there will be a loss of a lot of jobs if we will be staying in lockdown. And that is because we can have some alternatives online. We can have alternatives in all different ways of what I would like to call experience marketing or experience communication. But our industry is based on catering or on decoration, on venues, on things like that. And so this is one of the worst times ever for our industry. It is the worst time ever. So yes, in the Netherlands, they say 50% will lose their job within this industry. But I'm now talking about the, I hope I answer your question by that one. I'm now talking about the corporate event manager and the corporate event marketeer, or even the corporate live communication manager, or whatever they called, the experience manager, brand manager. We've got a lot of jobs that are involved in our industry. And I think, although it will be very hard the coming months and even probably the coming years, at corporate side, we stepped up the ladder. Events, live interaction, live contact from the brand towards the people, the consumer or relations or whatever they try to reach out, is there on top of that ladder. So I hope that has a positive influence, comparing it to 2008, where a lot of event teams were cut out of the bigger companies and the bigger brands. So again, if you have a question, please ask me in the chat and I will try to get back to you. And then there was a very special thing going on, and it was Julius Solaris from Event Manager Blog that just showed me the proof of the pudding. I didn't think of that one, but it happened after 2008. No, sorry, before 2008, our industry was booming and we did things over the top. But we also had some smaller room for looking at the climate, for looking at sustainability, for looking even on terms of inclusivity. Inclusivity, that's a strange word. For the Dutch people, inclusiviteit. Sorry for that one. And so that were things on our agenda in like 2007. And then in 2008, when the crisis started, strangely enough, these points on our agenda completely disappeared. Yes, more or less some of the concepts had like super vegan catering or biological catering in these years, but it wasn't really integrated in terms of goals on objectives. And it took us years and years to get these subjects back on our agenda. So for the last 3, maybe 4 years, it really became a topic again. But the question, of course, is, will this crisis, will we learn from 2008 that we have to do things differently or to adapt to the new world where climate and sustainability and things like that is very important at this moment? Or will we go and try to get back on the same track? And there's the question I will ask you in the final slide. But first, scenario 3, because in my opinion, scenario 3 is the scenario that comes as close as it can be towards the impact of the corona crisis on our industry. And then the question you have to ask yourself, I think, is what will happen when it all comes together? And all is in terms of 9/11 and the impact of that one, 2008 and the impact of what was going on, and also the impact of something new like this virus,